and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, typically we have, seems like we have a pretty good crowd here this evening, so I'm sure there'll be more than a handful of people that are going to want to offer their opinion or speak. So I'm going to ask that anybody potentially going to speak tonight, raise your hand, repeat after me, and then once we're going to, I will swear you in, we're going to just reconfirm it at the time you actually speak, okay? I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Thank you. Next item this evening is we have 4 members of the board hearing this case. Typically, we do have 5 regular members and 2 alternates. And we're kind of short-handed this evening, so we do not have a full quorum to take a vote in the case of a tie vote. So in the event that we do hear this case this evening, and we have a tie vote on any of these 2 cases, a tie vote is a no vote. So I just want to make sure that we're in a position, that you are the applicants, that you will understand that this evening and you're willing to move forward with this meeting. Otherwise, we can recess it until our next regularly scheduled meeting next month. Okay? Okay, the next item on our agenda here is I'm going to give you a brief BZA overview. You're going to have to bear with me. I'm not a public speaker, but my goal here is to, I'll take that back. We do have a form here, so. I'm going to give you a brief overview of the functions of the Board of Zoning Appeals. The Board of Zoning Appeals is a quasi-judicial body, and as such, its role is similar to a judge in a court case. The board will hear evidence and testimony that is factual and will make decisions based upon the facts presented, the rules as set forth in the zoning resolution, and the principles of law. The Ohio Revised Code Section 519.13 requires that any township that has adopted a zoning resolution, such as Auburn Township, that they are required to appoint a 5-member Board of Zoning Appeals along with 2 alternates. The board is empowered to hear and decide appeals and authorize variances from the strict terms of the zoning resolution where the variance will not be contrary to the public interest and where, due to special conditions, a liberal enforcement of the resolution will result in an unnecessary hardship. The BZA is also permitted to authorize variances where the spirit and intent of the zoning is upheld and substantial justice will be done. The BZA is empowered to grant conditional use permits as well. With this being stated, the board proceedings are relatively informal, but in order to conduct an orderly meeting and allow all parties of interest, and that would mean any contiguous property owners, the opportunity to present the evidence necessary to make the board's decisions, certain procedures need to be followed. All interested parties will be sworn in. The applicants will be asked to present their evidence and to support their requested appeal. The board will ask questions, and all interested parties, and that being contiguous property owners, may present evidence concerning the appeal and ask questions regarding previously presented evidence. It is the applicant's burden to produce evidence to support the application. The board will not make the applicant's case for them. In order to prepare appropriate meeting minutes, each person who speaks will need to state for the record his or her name and address. The meeting may be continued by either the applicant or the board. The board must base their decisions on facts and not expressions of concerns or non-factual matters. The actions of the Board of Zoning Appeal does not become final until 30 days after the date of the meeting that the meeting minutes are approved. This board has 30 days to approve those meeting minutes. Any appeals from the final decision of the Board of Zoning Appeals will be made to the Geauga County Common Pleas Court by any member of the interested parties, but that would be a contiguous property owner they must be present at the meeting. One more item before we hear these cases this evening. We're hearing variance requests that vary from compliance with our zoning resolution. We are not here to hear issues associated with the homeowners association, your deed restrictions. We are strictly here to interpret what is in the zoning resolution and the application's situation according to that. I understand you have a homeowners association, you have deeds and certain requirements that must be met, but they're really not our concern for this meeting, okay? With that said, we'll kick this thing off. We're actually hearing two variance requests this evening, both submitted by the same applicant. They're for the same structure. One is regarding a side yard setback, and the other is regarding a height variance. So I'm going to read both variance requests here, but we are going to hear the case as one case since they intermingle with each other. The Board of Zoning Appeals then will make two separate votes on each one of your variance requests, okay? With that said, old business, we do not have any old business this evening. New business, the first case is the BZA 1502. This is a request for a variance submitted by Glenn and Lori Smith of Auburn Township Zoning Resolution Article 5.02A, accessory buildings. Detached accessory buildings may be located inside or rear yard at least 15 feet from any lot line or other building on the same lot, or a constructed building that encroaches into the 15-foot setback located at 11785 Edinburgh Lane in an R2 zoning district in Auburn Township 44023. The second item of business is BZA 1503V, a request for a variance submitted by Glenn and Lori Smith from the Auburn Township Zoning Resolution, Article 4.03H, maximum building height. No accessory building shall exceed the height of 23 feet. For a constructed building that exceeds the height allowance located at 11785 Edinburgh Lane in R2 zoning district, Auburn Township, Ohio 44023. With that said, I'm going to turn this over to the applicants, and would you please confirm that you've been sworn in?
Yes.
And would you please let Jane know state your name and your address, please.
Glenn Smith, 11785 Edinburgh.
Lori Smith, 11785 Edinburgh.
Okay, with that said, we're going to turn this over to you and let you explain your situation for your two variance requests this evening.
Okay. Thank you, Brian. It's going to be a little difficult, but I'll try to not involve the ARB or deed restrictions. But there's some pieces in here that I don't know how I can't. So I do apologize if I'm in changing the direction of the meeting. But as we stated in our what we call our narrative, we believe that we had a proper approval back in 2013 from the ARB. We have an email to state that, which our barn plans were included. The conversation about our barn in terms of the original pitch that we had didn't meet the deed restrictions. So while we preferred that the original barn was only 18 feet tall, the deed restrictions made us change the pitch to match our roof, which is a 12-12. And in doing so, it actually made our barn plans, when we submitted them to Geauga County for the first time, 32 feet, which they approved, the Geauga County building. When we brought them to Auburn zoning, it was brought to my builder at the time, who was presenting it, Clinton Marbury from Best Builders, that it exceeded the 23 feet. And so it was suggested, as I'm told from, and Clinton is promised to be here, that if we change the pitch to an 812, which is the minimum that we can in our deed restrictions, it would meet the 23 feet. So that's what we did, and we submitted it. And so to that end, we never thought it was exceeding 23 feet because that's what it said on the plans that we submitted. But if you do the math, it actually, the 812 pitch and 11-foot wall, it turns out to be 25 feet. And in fact, when we submitted our changes to the what's called the ARB, and then we resubmitted it in the variance request, we submitted our plans telling you it was 25 feet. So if we thought we were trying to put one over on somebody, we wouldn't have submitted them as 25 feet. We didn't know what the restrictions were. So we, in fact, brought to your attention that we built something over 23 feet. So it was us that brought it to your attention. And then it was Frank that brought it to our attention that we exceeded the 23 feet. Does that make sense? Can I ask that? I'm sorry. Am I allowed to ask clarity?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm just a little confused because I saw the variance application. As a matter of fact, a copy was provided to the board that clearly showed this at with a 30-foot setback and a 23-foot height. I haven't seen anything that was submitted post that showed a building with a different height than that.
The last one that we had the architect, when we were asked then to have official architectural drawings drawn up, that was the one that was drawn up to be 25 feet, 3 inches and a quarter, I believe. I think there's a copy there. So that was when we were asked. I think that's the last drawing that.
I have one from 8/25/14. It states 23-foot height and a 30-foot.
That's the original.
That's the original.
There should be in the.
We had to submit plans, and the plans we submitted showed it as 25 feet.
The architectural drawing, and then I know that the application that I wrote, I did write 25 feet.
Yeah.
But I don't have copies of what I originally sent in, so that's the answer that it is.
Yeah, it's definitely that one here. Sorry. In this tab here.
Drawings.
You have a 25, 3 and a half.
What they
Right.
Yeah.
That's what we submitted.
Which would have been the variance for not the
That's for the
That's the
variance.
the March 27th.
That's for the variance.
Right.
It's not for the
Applying for it?
application.
No, right.
This is a variance
That's
you're
what you're
applying for?
asking for.
variance application. Oh, I'm sorry.
My point is there anything that we've seen that was ever submitted to the board that you were granted a permit for? My understanding it showed 23 feet.
Yes.
Yes.
That's
And that included a 30-foot setback on the building.
correct.
Okay.
I'm not sure what would just happen. So
Well, I'm just confused. I mean,
Well, this is, if I may, Brian, this is what was originally submitted to this office by your builder.
yes.
Approved. With the site plan, it also shows the building.
This is the
feet off the
original.
property.
What day was that, Frank?
and that was the August of 14. I believe that was with the August of 14 application.
Correct.
Okay.
And it was approved September with,
This is original 23 feet.
Yeah.
This is original and submitted.
Correct. Correct. That picture that you're looking at. But in fact, if we were done the math by looking at the truss and the height of the wall, it actually isn't 23 feet. It comes out to be 25 feet.
Okay.
And so my point is, when we applied for the variance, we submitted new drawings because the ARB had asked for better drawings, more description in terms of the stone and brick that we're using. So we submitted those, and then in fact that came back at 25 feet, and that's what we submitted in that variance request. So I guess my point was is once we did that, we then acknowledged the fact, or made Frank aware that our building isn't 23 feet, it's 25 feet. So we weren't originally asking for a variance of height. We were asking for a variance of the distance from the property line. Does that make sense?
Okay. All right.
they don't have the copy of it because it was a 32, the one that was approved by.
Geography. But I don't think geography really makes a difference here.
Right.
Right.
As I'm learning.
So, as I understand it, the March, the request for this meeting here, the variance, that's when it was discovered that the building exceeded the height.
Correct.
Well, that's when,
It was,
That's when we discovered the building exceeded the height.
right.
The builder initially submitted prints that were, I believe, 32 feet high. They were verbally sent back with the option of applying then for a variance or bringing it to meet the resolution. He resubmitted it, showing the 23 feet. Where these extra 2 feet came from, I don't know.
So you knew at that time it needed to be 23 feet?
Well, actually, I didn't know anything. We submitted, our builder submitted the plans, and he said that it exceeded, and so we needed to change the pitch of the roof. And so he resubmitted the plans, and he said the minimum we could go is 12. I'm like, okay, that's better for me because it's less lumber and less of a truss. So I actually felt better about that. But only to find out that the architect that built or that put it at 23 feet, but it was only just supposed to be 25 feet. So, I mean, if he would submit him at 25 feet, then we would have known to come, and I don't know what we would have done then, but...
Because you were building already, right?
No.
You weren't building?
We hadn't built. We didn't do anything until we had all the permits or an approval.
but the height issue was not even really formal until the application for the variance.
Correct.
Okay. What about the side yard setback? When did that become an issue? Because as I indicated, the August of 14 application showed a 30-foot setback.
Yeah, so when it became an issue, one of the reasons why it became an issue is our neighbor had an issue with us building the barn. Okay, and so in talking to the ARB, she had said we didn't submit the correct plans. We need to go through, have a new site plan done. We need to have a new architect design new architectural drawings. So when we went through that process of hiring a surveyor and a new architect, the surveyor came back and said, you're in one corner of your barn, you're 7 feet away from the property, or 7.5 feet or something like that. 6 1/4.
How did you get from 30 to who made the decision to move this building over?
It wasn't a decision of moving it, it was that I measured it wrong. So when we were originally putting the stakes in the ground, the stakes to mark the location, I was using a property marker that was between the two houses. But it wasn't a property marker. I don't know what it was.
So you staked out the building?
I staked out the building. But to that point, before we did anything, we had pulled all the permits, and Clinton, who's here now, he said, you need to call for an inspection to make sure that everything's measured correctly and we're doing everything. So I did call, and I talked to Frank and explained what I was doing, and Frank said, no, I need to call Geauga. So I called Geauga, but unfortunately what Geauga does is they just measure the holes. They don't actually measure any distance. So they don't measure the distance from the property line.
I think, if I may speak, the confusion is he didn't speak to me, he spoke to Nancy. Nancy's question to me was, gentleman needs to lay out his poles and get his poles inspected. And I said, that's not my issue, that's the county's issue. Because they check the depth, the diameter. I don't have anything to do with that. I did not know that they needed a site inspection. I thought the conversation from Nancy to me was that they wanted their poles inspected. And my assumption was, whether it was right or wrong,
foundation.
it's,
Footers
the footers for the poles, not, and how big the diameter of the pole, the holes are and everything. That's up to the county. That's not up to me. So.
And I didn't know the difference. So we called Jaga and we scheduled a time for them to come out and inspect it.
They did too.
Yeah, they were up at the house with
Yeah,
me.
they
Guys
did.
said, "Oh, they were here today," and I said, "Oh, I was just up at Geography today." So the guys told me that.
At that point, was there with poles in the ground, or was it
No.
Okay.
No, they weren't in the ground because we called. I mean, when I called first of all, I called a couple times for them to schedule it when the Amish crew were out. We had not done anything. I mean, we didn't put any poles in the ground. I was told we couldn't put any poles in the ground until they inspected. That's what Jaga told us.
Okay.
So
that's a procedure.
So we didn't. We had them sitting there waiting until they came out, and I don't know exactly what happened because I wasn't there. But I'm told they then had to dig a hole and they had to measure the depth and make sure they knew what they were doing. That's what they told me afterwards. And again, I assumed that they measured everything. I didn't know any better, and we didn't know we were not near the property line until we actually had it professionally surveyed.
Did you act as your own builder on this project?
Clinton, who was the original builder, the one who originally did the designs, the unfortunate part is he wasn't able to get a crew together. So after a long summer, he just said he couldn't get a crew together. So I went out and found some Amish people to build a barn. So that's who I used, some Amish people to build it. But to say I was a builder, I wasn't a builder. I just said, here are the plans, here's what I need to get done, and they quoted it, and then they built it.
You were the builder.
Oh, okay.
Builder.
Yeah.
You're the general, basically. You made the phone calls and hired
Did you set it up?
people and
Interviewed the
called for inspections.
subcontractors, obtained the bids, made the decision.
Okay. So that's how it was where it is in terms of the distance from the property, and that's why the height is where it is.
Was your intention always to move it over from, 30 feet and 8 feet, quite a bit different?
Well, not where you measure, not if you see where the property marker were. It's not. It's from the property markers to where it is. It's 30 feet, but it's not. Those aren't property markers that I used.
Okay.
What you thought they were property.
I thought they were property markers, and one of the reasons why I thought that, well, it should look like a property marker. And this is not a dig on Mary, but one of the things she said when we were buying the property, she said when you see like saplings cut with an angle, the surveyors do that to show you that that's where the property line is. So I saw those near the property.
I said the surveyors do that so they can see through the woods to cite things.
Okay. So I saw that near the property marker and thought, this must be the property marker.
So you did not have a survey done, obviously, before you elected to put the
No,
foundation?
I did not.
Okay.
So that's the process, and that's why it is where it is.
When did you actually start construction on this?
It was probably the second week of October.
The last
Of last
14th.
year. Yeah, 14.
And when did you stop construction?
November 1st.
So you're less than a month into this.
Yeah. And, yeah,
What was the reason? Why did you stop construction?
we were asked by the ARB to stop.
So that had nothing to do with why you're here today, other than the possible side yard setback. Correct. There was some questions there about the setback at that point. There must have been there.
No.
What was their concern?
The
That it's too big. But you mean the ARB or our neighbors?
The reason that you stopped.
Yeah,
The
why?
reason we stopped was because our neighbors had expressed concern to us and had us over and expressed concern that they could see it and it was large from the kitchen window and they didn't feel things matched. And so we then got a call from Mary and said, you guys didn't get approval, you didn't get this, you didn't do this, you didn't do this, and you got to get this, and stop construction.
So that was all ARB and homeowners association related issues.
Correct.
That had nothing to do with the township at that time.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. So we stopped immediately.
Okay, and that's where it sits today?
And that's where it sits today.
Okay.
So if the ARB didn't stop you, this building would be built and...
Correct. It'd have stone, brick, and be all done. Garage doors and everything.
Okay. With that said, is there anything else you want to present or anything
Well,
else?
there's lots of things I want to present,
Sure.
but in terms of the reference of how you said, stay away from the ARB and deed restrictions.
If you're welcome to touch on those items, but please don't go into great detail. I know that's an issue with your neighborhood, and all homeowners associations and deed restrictions that they set up are very specific. Like I said, we're really concerned about what our resolution requires. But if there's something that, the point why you stop construction is an interesting fact that we probably wouldn't be sitting here today if that didn't happen. But, if there's anything else you want to present that bring forward some facts here, well, we're more than welcome to listen.
The rest is more just emotion of why we built the barn and what we're trying to accomplish with, the neighborhood and the community. We have a camper that we're trying to put under shelter because it was an annoyance, so we had to store it off-site in the previous year. But the reason why we built the barn the way we did, and to some extent the size of it, was to fit the camper, but also is because the reason why we actually built it for October is quickly as we did, because we have an annual community Halloween party for the neighborhood. I guess the point of it wasn't just a barn, it was supposed to be a neighborhood place where we can all get together. We had done 4th of July parties, Halloween parties, so we thought this was a good thing, not a bad thing. And, we had no ill will towards anyone in what we did. And most of the decisions, everything we did was try to be in compliance, not to defy anyone or any zoning laws.
Okay. Does anybody on the board have any questions? I'm going to ask.
Wait a minute. Can we just walk through the zoning benchmarks that occurred from Frank, first submittal, all the way up to where we are now, just to kind of refresh? And we kind of hit them real quick, but just to summarize them for the record. Or so we got submittal on the 13th.
Well, they submitted, we approved, first the 32 feet was a no-no, so then they resubmitted. And it kind of sat dormant for quite a while, and because they, like he said, you couldn't get a crew together and everything, and then they, when they resubmitted, but they got it down to 23 feet, and supposedly, and everything looked good, but then there was no movement, nothing was being done or anything, and that was because Clinton couldn't put a crew together, and then eventually they got somebody else to do it, and that's when the ball got rolling, and I was made aware of it. The first that this office was made aware of it was when the neighbor called asking questions, and I think Jamie's explained to that neighbor at that time, somebody's going to have to do a survey, that it's not the township's responsibility, nor do we have the expertise to determine exactly where a property line is to be, 6 inch plus or minus. We can't do that. We don't have the equipment or anything else. And I can, in defense of Glenn, and I'm not supporting it one way or the other here, but looking at the lay of the land and the landscaping that's been done and everything, I can see very easily how they mistook this stake. And what it was, and I don't know if it's still there now or not, but there was a wooden stake with a red ribbon off to the side, and it's truly now in their neighbor's yard. But I could see how someone, and if you stand at the road and look at the way the lots are landscaped and everything to this day, it appears that I'm not so sure that your swing set's not partially on your neighbor's property now looking at it, or very close, you know.
Oh, we verified it is, so I don't know if there's a variance on that, but
No, there isn't, but I'm just saying, it looks very, you know, but I can see by the way the landscaping has been done.
That's what I was looking at when I
Yeah,
drive by. The swing set looks
right,
pretty close to the property.
right, but, so I can, you know, in that realm within that, but I believe that's the first this office was made aware, and then we started to check back. We'll know there was never any site inspection made. Then we called the building department, and the building department says yes, that they did make an inspection on the poles, and that the poles were done properly and everything, and everything is.
At this time, the building was built, then, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
And part of the reason it's taken so long for this to get to this point is they were out of town. They missed the deadline, especially when we cut to 25 feet versus the 23 feet. So, you know, we originally had this meeting scheduled for a month earlier, or maybe 2 months earlier, but because the time frame won't, you know, it got pushed back. So that's part of the reason why it seems like it's a long time when in essence, you know, they were out of town and
a couple months.
Yeah.
Reality. One of the questions I was going to ask our fire chief over here, Chief, I know that there's a good reason why we have height variance on these buildings in our township. And obviously one of them is a life safety issue. And it's also so they can service with their equipment and properly fight any emergency that they have. Chief, do you want to comment on that, or is there any concerns you have with this?
Well, to start with, being 2 feet over is not life or death for us. We want to stick to the zoning codes as we planned them with you guys. But fire department has no objection to either variance should you approve it. Okay.
Okay, the next step here is if there are any contiguous property owners that would like to speak this evening. If you are, would you raise your hand? We'll talk to you one at a time, and you can state your name and confirm you've been sworn in. Go ahead, ma'am.
Sure. For the record, I'm Shannon Moores. My address is 11805 Edinburgh Lane.
Okay.
I live directly beside the Smiths.
You live just to the east of going toward 44.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So I wanted to take the time to present a few things. I'm hearing some new information today, so I'm trying to absorb everything, but wanted to share with the zoning board some of the situation and how things have transpired over the past, I would say, few months. To be clear, the intent for me and always from the beginning has been to try and understand how these types of structures get approved and what's the process. So I did invite the Smiths over to our house on, I believe it was November 1st. But prior to doing that, obviously seeing the construction go up, seeing the building, was somewhat concerned. We just moved to the area April of last year, and certainly wasn't familiar with what was allowed and what wasn't, both within the ARB and also within the township. So took the time to look at the deed restriction for the ARB, which I won't go into, but then also the residential zoning code, right? Residential district regulations. So I pulled both of those documents and wanted to take a look to see, because what Lori alluded to is correct. I felt that the building was enormous. It was an eyesore, and it obstructed the view that we thought that we purchased. So I went through both documents. I had some concerns and some questions, so I invited the Smiths over on November 1st. They came over to our home, and I asked them a few questions. I did ask them questions about what I felt was conflicting with the ARB, the deed document, but also talked to them about the pitch as well, because prior to them coming to our home, Glenn did submit some drawings to me, and I have those. I can share with you what he shared with me. And the pitch looked like it was too high based on what I read in the residential district regulation. So I brought up the ARB issues that I had, but then also brought up the pitch piece as well, where both of them had agreed that yes, the drawing that I was looking at was incorrect. They were notified by zoning that they needed to redo the document, and they did that. But the document that I was looking at was incorrect, but that what they were building was in compliance. So I said, that's fine. I'll be honest with you, that I thought that we could live with it. I mean, as it was being built, I just wasn't sure exactly how big it was going to be and what it was going to look like. And that was the other piece that I talked to them about. And I know it's not required in any document to sit with your neighbor and talk about what you're building next to them. But to me, it was the neighborly, or I heard a word recently, harmonious thing to do for the neighborhood is to sit down with the neighbor and say, this is what we're building it this close to your property. I brought up those concerns when we sat together, and genuinely, I believe they did acknowledge we could have done things differently. So they said, we could have done things differently. We could have sat with you and we could have shown you what to expect, and we apologize that we didn't do that. And I think for me the challenge was I feel like every time we hit a roadblock or I had a question, it was either inaccurate information, or we didn't know, so we have to adjust the drawing, or we probably should have met with you, but we didn't. So I felt, honestly, that the discussion that we had with them was quite genuine, and we did talk about some landscaping options. As we progressed, the thing that was probably most concerning to me is when it was November 4th, and I have the documents to share with you, but November 4th I received an email from Lori really questioning my intent of our meeting and questioning, quite frankly, I felt my integrity, and asking how and why I was stopping the construction of their barn. So I did respond to her, and I put the response in here, and I can share it with you, but basically responded to say that wasn't ever my intent. I was very clear that I wanted to understand how these things get approved, what's the impact that it has on the people that it's built beside, and if you're telling me that you didn't get it approved through the ARB, then I want to call it ARB, and I want to let them know that the process hasn't been followed. I explained in the email I don't have the authority to stop construction, but I also explained in the email, please know that I also talked to Mary, or the ARB, about potential resolution around landscaping issues. But still, quite honestly, then had to recap in my mind to say, I invite you to my home, you meet with me, you tell me, yeah, we could have done things differently and met with you. Yes, our drawings are inaccurate, and yes, we want to make sure that we're doing the right thing. But at the end of the day, you send me an email saying that I have some type of hidden agenda, and that certainly wasn't the intent.
And I can click. I want to respond to that too, because we are neighbors, and I want you to understand where some of that came from. Some of my anger came from, to be honest, a call that Glenn and I had with Mary the next day, where we talked about some things, and she said, well, that's not what Shannon said. Well, that's not what she said. Well, that wasn't her intent. And so I think we're going on.
I have a question.
I don't mean that.
Time out. I have a question on, just so I understand your homeowners association. I've been involved in new developments and moving in. I drove through your neighborhood, beautiful neighborhood. I didn't count the house, what, about 15 houses in there somewhere right around, and I noticed that 4 of them have accessory buildings.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, and so one of the things that once the homeowners
Right.
Once X percentage of the lots are sold, the homeowners association transfers from the developer to the true they develop. That's when you establish your homeowners association, you have your presidents and
No,
chairman.
the homeowners association.
What is the status right now of your homeowners association?
We have turned over the homeowners association. We did not turn over the architectural review board. Jerry's built 70 subdivisions. I've only built 11. But we keep the architectural review board until we are sold out of all of our lots, and then we give the last lots a little while where we can review it, because it is much better for a third party to review plans than to have your neighbor review them.
Okay, that's fine. I just wanted the clarification.
But we never turned over the ARB. So in our history, we have always.
Come on. Please state your name.
Oh, Mary
your
Lambert.
address.
And Jerry Peterson and I are officers of Square Woods who built Edinburgh.
And your address, please.
15580 Clarendon Troy Road. We own the lot next to it, and we own the lot behind it, and own more lots than we want to. But what was I saying?
You were explaining the ARP. We have established a homeowners association, and now you're taking control of the ARP.
Yeah. Okay. When the subdivision was almost all built out and there started to be accessory buildings, we always would ask the neighbors around each parcel how they felt about it. And there are a couple buildings in there, but none of them are within 30 feet of the property line. They're all, we've kept to the 30 foot. And I think Glenn knew that, and that's why he put it at 30 feet. And I understand you're not here about the architectural review board, but 15 foot was news to me that was the township regulation, and that's fine, generally, but in Edinburgh we would prefer it wasn't. But I contacted them and told them that they needed to submit it September 25th, and never got a good submission, and then it was November 1st when they stopped. It could have stopped sooner.
Okay.
Frank, can I add to that?
Please. Go ahead.
So, when I originally submitted my plans to the ARB, which is Mary Lambert, and I have an email from her that's saying, I don't see a problem with your plans, but you need to draw it on your site plans, and I think Auburn Township should approve it. And it says, what we've been asking people to do is get the approval from the HOA.
No.
I have it in digital email.
Okay. All right.
So that's why we submitted to the HOA, and there are many folks in the HOA that verbally heard her say it. This is unrelated to this. So I just want to state the fact that that's not what we were told, and that's not what the neighbors heard.
Okay. All right. Well, so that's. Go ahead.
I don't remember exactly how that's worded, but
I read it verbatim.
What I always do is submit it to the HOA, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't have to be approved for the ARB, because the HOA they're the people that have to live with it.
Sure.
But obviously, they're not equipped to be an ARB, or they would have asked for a real site plan and stakes, which would have eliminated all this. We wouldn't be here tonight.
Okay. One more. The neighbor had one more comment.
Yeah, I just want to finish, I guess, the situation. But they're right that at some point, I believe it was November 4th, they were asked to stop construction. And then it wasn't until, I would say, February 27th that I was informed in a discussion that I had with Jane that at this point now I have new news because we're being invited to the zoning board meeting that was supposed to take place on March 10th for a variance meeting. This is how we found out that now they're too close to our property, and it wasn't until we received the letter that we also realized that there was a pitch issue as well. I have the emails that we've submitted back and forth, the concerns that I have, my I guess I have two big concerns. One is that for me, I guess the regulations are there for a reason and the process exists for a reason. somehow everyone else in the HOA figured out how to follow the process and build what they said they were going to build. Now I'm sitting beside a building that the drawings that are submitted or what was shown to me are inaccurate. I have them admitting that we could have handled things differently, and then unfortunately don't have, quite honestly, the decency to come to my home and say, guess what, we made another mistake. We're now too close to your home, and the pitch is too high. At least to sit with me and say, we made another mistake. And what you're hearing today from them is the same thing that I'm hearing. I didn't know. I thought that this is what we could do. These are things that, quite honestly, I read the 2 documents. I'm not new to buying and selling homes. I've been doing it for a very long time in many different states in 2 different countries. And somehow I figured out the 2 documents and what the regulations are and aren't. So the fact that I'm sitting beside our neighbors who are telling me that they didn't know, we made a mistake, we want to do the right thing, again, never once came back to me and said, guess what, we made yet another mistake. And that's my concern. In addition to, and I'll make my last point, these types of buildings, the size they are, how big they are, they do interrupt, I would say, and in my opinion and experience, the integrity of the neighborhood. There are several outbuildings that are on people's homes. They followed the process. They're well within the deed restriction of the ARB. I'm assuming they followed the process with zoning. I am looking at a home. The Smiths have a ton of property, and somehow they managed to build this on my property in my backyard. Again, to me, shows that there's a complete lack of, I would say, respect for not only the neighbor, the integrity of the neighborhood, but the process that needs to be followed around what the restrictions read, whether it's the ARB or with the county.
Do we have any other contiguous property owners? Or please state your name.
Jim Brown. I'm at 11730 Edinburgh Lane.
And where are you in conjunction to this property?
There's a lot in between Glenn and Lori.
Is that the property that Mary Lambert owns now?
Yes.
Okay.
So I just really want to state that I feel like Glenn and Lori went above and beyond kind of what they had to do in order to kind of go through this process. I felt like they really did try to get the thoughts of the neighbors that were around them. Obviously, there was some issues with the process and the approval process with the ARB and the Homeowners Association. And that's not like some of the other buildings that were built in that lot. I'm also the treasurer of the HOA. So, there were a couple buildings that didn't follow the process that Mary and Shannon are talking about that have subsequently been approved by Mary as the ARB. I just want to let you know that I do not have an issue with the variances that are out there. I do not think it impacts the neighborhood. If anything, it improves it. The building will be, well within their current house as far as similar materials, stonework, things like that. That I think will make it a very nice building and a nice addition to the neighborhood. I think there's a lot of different viewpoints about, what people think as far as how big a building is or how small it is and what that does to the property value, but that's just the opinion of an individual. I grew up in an area where there was a lot of property and we'd like to have a big building, so I view that as an asset, not as a detriment to the property value.
Got a couple other gentlemen back here. Your name, please?
Clinton Marbury.
And you live in your
I live
address?
at 11890 Edinburgh Lane.
Okay. And where is your house in conjunction?
My house is the first house on the north side of Edinburgh.
Okay.
As soon as you turn in. I had originally submitted the plans, and I built another one of the barns that's on the street. I built one before that and helped Glenn finish his basement. And I've been there for a while. And I just want to kind of agree with what Mr. Brown here has said. If you all could have read the emails that the Smiths and the rest of the street sent out when he was building the garage about the party that they were going to have, and everybody talking about what they were going to bring to the party and everything, and the fact that every time we have a street this or that, Glenn is always involved. I think it's he doesn't do anything to try to hurt that street. He served on the board and he talked to all of us knew that garage was going up for a long time. And if anybody had problems with the garage, they would have said something a long time before that. All of us knew it was going to be big because Glenn does everything big, and he's trying to improve the street. That's all it is.
Go ahead. Since you've done some building in that development, you are aware of the zoning.
Yeah, and I'm the one that told him that he needed to call to get the site checked before they poured. He did make the phone call to the correct place, but just like what I heard, when he called, they didn't understand what he was asking for. So if he would have came out just like he came out when I built the other one, and he looked at where it was, he would have automatically, maybe, because like he said, he thought it might have been a PN2, but he may have told him to stop right then. But I did tell him to call, but he had to get the site approved first. But, I had stepped out of the project.
And you know the height restrictions also?
Yeah, we went through the situation with the height restriction. The lady right there, me and her went through it, and I came back and I got it redrawn and everything to fit the height as we.
So you assisted in the process.
Yeah, I assisted in the process up to that point. Then after that, I hadn't even had the permits to it. And then after that, me and Glenn talked, and we decided to part ways there, and he was going to take it from there, get another contractor to actually build it.
How did we know then, once the drawings were drawn, that it couldn't be built to those specs then?
That part I'm still lost on. All I know is that we changed it to meet the.
So the call was made to the Geauga County Building Department, but not to our zoning inspector.
No,
they did.
Yeah.
It was made to Nancy fielded the call, and Nancy called me and said, I remember, she said, I have someone that's called in here who wants poles inspected for a pole building. I said, I don't inspect poles. I inspect, the setback. Between Glenn, Nancy, and myself, it was a miscommunication all around. She told them to go ahead and call the Geauga County Building Department, which they did. And he came to the building department, did come out and inspect that because I verified that, But that's what happened, and
So obviously there was miscommunication. You knew exactly what needed to be done.
What to do, yeah.
Right.
Somehow the first thing that unfortunately Glenn and them did wrong is the site plan that they submitted was based off of the topo of their house. So they should have been putting all the lines from the house. They should have been, and then it couldn't have been wrong. If they had put everything from the house, then it couldn't have been wrong because the house and the site plan is the key to that whole puzzle because the property line could be anywhere. That's the only reason why cities accept topos from site plans because you pull it from a house that has been surveyed, then you can't go wrong. But,
that was my next question.
He didn't know that. But it would have never happened if I would have been involved, but I wasn't.
Got it. We'll take more questions. Gentlemen in the back.
Robert Gallman, 750 Madison. I'm a real estate agent with RE/MAX for the last 19 years. I was the person that sold Tom and Shannon their home, and I can speak professionally to Mr. Brown's comment about value. A building such as this, and I have personally examined it, does have a direct impact on the value, and that's the reason that I feel it's a pretty strong reason that the variance should not be granted, is because there is a direct opinion or reflection to value. It's meaning that if I'm out on the back deck with a buyer showing them the property and there's this barn right on the property line, that interferes with your everyday life and the view that the moors purchased, whereas if it was positioned properly, the view would be different, and if they would have followed the rules, then it would fit within the standard, which would have a less of an impact on value. So really the moors financially can be hurt by this building when they go to sell their house, and they're a relocation family. Shannon's talked about a number of times they moved in different places, and if they move and I get the call to list our house, we're going to have to talk about the impact of this building on the value of their home, and that's real, and that's why the variance should not be granted.
Okay. One more. Sir, you have one. Your name, please?
Michael Lux, 17060 Ravenna Road.
Okay.
I'm a contiguous neighbor.
Your property is to the south?
To the south, yeah.
To this, okay.
Right. I'm retired out of Local 860, heavy highway. For 20 years I did layout and grading. I engineered plans that were wrong from the city of Westlake, from CT Consultants, from a number of different things. I've reconfigured stuff. I've had surveyors come up to me and ask me, what did you do to make that radius work so that I can submit it as an as-built so that the city gets the proper, distance and all that. I own 4 lots surrounding my house. All of them have a Ravenna Road address. Mm-hmm. When it came time for me to do any work, to pull permits for the mounds or anything else, I hired a professional surveyor. As skilled as I am, I hired a professional surveyor for $300 to find out all 4 corners of all 4 lots. Well, actually, one is an L-shaped lot, has weird angles, that has like 9 corners. But to not hire a professional to find out exactly where your lot line is before you build leads to these situations.
Okay.
Big mistake.
I just want to comment on a couple of things. I in no way think that there was any type of malicious intent, and I never want the group to think that. For me, again, the intent from the very beginning is the regulations and the requirements and what you need to do to build these types of structures needs to be followed. The amount of times that we've heard, I don't know, and I didn't know, and we thought this, and we thought that, it's disturbing. Okay. So, but just one more point, because I think it's last point. So Jim had brought up about the impact to our home. The one comment that Lori had made in our home when we had them over was, these types of buildings are what people in Jaga County are used to. I'm not from Jaga County. I'm not from there. There's people on our street that are not from there. I didn't grow up on a 30-acre farm. But what I can tell you is it's less than diverse, those comments, that we need to make sure that we're a little bit more open-minded, because when there is a time where I have to sell my home, I can't target just Jaga County residents and people who grow up on 30-acre farms.
Okay, one comment that I would like to make. Our zoning resolution allows for these buildings to be built on these pieces of property. It's look in your neighborhood, drive around, you see them all over the place. So it is a permitted. Accessory buildings can be permitted, and you can put large accessory buildings, you can put small ones on, so they are permitted. Mm-hmm. Okay? Any questions on the board? Any comments that we have here?
Okay, Hartford.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry again, I guess for the chatterbox today. Obviously, the root cause or whatever happened here is in a discrepancy or something occurred. What's the solution? Is the solution in the spirit of the zoning resolution? How far outside or is this discrepancy out of reason? I'm looking at just, I guess, plain facts again. How it happened, it's here. We have holes in the ground, we have a building partially up. Can we offer a property swap? Can we offer landscape screening? A very thick, diverse, lively landscape screening?
Many of the things you're talking about are conditional type of scenarios. It's not a condition. This is a variance.
I'm looking at things to help resolve any issues between neighbors, and just the clear, simple facts. I mean, again, you have 23.65 feet off the original proposed 30 feet, and then you're 8.65 off the required 15 feet, more than 50%. I don't know, am I making a mountain out of a molehill, or is it something just to let go, or is it in the spirit of the neighborhood, is it a good thing? I'm throwing out generic questions that are neutral for you guys just to think about. The height thing, I can see it. The height issue disappears with topography and the house and the way it's set back and a lot. Like Chief Phillips or John said, I don't think it's an issue. I think it's the property line one that may be the issue. But then again, if you moved it to where it was required, would that massive structure change appearance, or would it be that big of a alteration to make it not like poof disappear like you would never see it? You're still going to see a big building. So I mean, this is true. Yeah.
Can we still make a comment to yours about the spirit of the neighborhood?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, Kristen McBride, 11770 Edinburgh Lane.
And you are, where's your house?
I'm in the cul-de-sac kind of across the street. I don't think you move to Geauga County and buy 2 to 3 acres of land and expect to have somebody's accessory building 7 feet away from your property line. So when you talk about the spirit of the neighborhood or anybody that lives in Geauga County that goes out to buy that much land, I think that that's a concern, and I really think that it should be considered.
Okay.
You mean you approve that? Being that close, or you disapprove?
Disapprove. Okay. You don't have that much land to be that close.
Not taking votes, okay? Yes.
Chuck McBride, 11770 Edinburgh Lane, across the cul-de-sac. Just along with that, as one person gets a variance, doesn't follow the rules, then that opens up for other rules, other variances to be added into the neighborhood. And who's to stop then? What's to stop the next guy, my neighbor, from putting one 6 feet off the property line, and he's got precedent set by this variance that was done through ignorance to the ordinance. And we got a building up, and ignorance is no defense.
Okay. In defense of our zoning resolution, each case is handled individually. There's no precedent setting on your neighbor's property or somebody in another neighborhood. We look at these on an individual basis. Okay. As far as your deed restrictions, and your homeowners association, and your ARB, that's a different subject.
Right, I'm not concerned with that.
Okay, but I'm stating that we take each case on an individual basis. We do not have a precedent set by a neighbor or anything else, okay? Ms. Lambert?
I know it's not about the ARB. It's about the regulations. But it's really a shame that we're here, but this didn't have to happen if procedure was followed. And it is, I was told that when I initially heard about this on the 25th of September, I was told that the neighbors had no problem with it. They were storing their lawnmower there. And I was like, hallelujah, where I see a can of worms here I don't want to get involved in. But it isn't where it was supposed to be. It isn't what it was supposed to be. And that's not, that's just careless.
Okay, very good. Are there any other questions on the board here? Okay, I'm going to make a motion to vote, so I'm going to read each one of these individual in a positive manner, and then once we hear after I motion, we will need somebody to second it, and we will take a vote. Okay. The first item is BZA 1502B. This is a request for a variance submitted by Glenn and Lori Smith from Auburn Township, zoning resolution 5.02A accessory building. Detached accessory building may be located inside or rear yard at least 15 feet from any lot line or other buildings on the same lot, for a constructed building that encroaches the 15-foot setback located at 11785 Edinburgh Lane in an R2 zoning district, Auburn Township 44023.
There's a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Take the vote now. Mr. Peeler?
This is on the setback, right?
Setback.
This is on the side yard setback.
Oh, no.
Mr. Parker?
No.
Mrs. Bellin?
No.
Mr. Freebairn?
No.
Mr. Stewart?
No. Next item. BZA 150V, a request for a variance submitted by Glenn and Lori Smith from Auburn Township zoning resolution 4.03H, maximum building height. And no accessory building shall exceed a height of 23 feet for a constructed building that exceeds the height allowance located at 11785 Edinburgh Lane in an R2 zoning district, Auburn Township, Ohio 44023.
Second, please.
Second. Second.
Okay. Mr. Peeler,
Yes to grant.
Mr. Parker,
No.
Mrs. Beller,
Yes.
Mr. Freebairn,
Yes.
I'm sorry,
Yes.
Mr. Stewart,
Yes.
motion granted.
Okay. So with that said, we have accepted to grant a variance on BZA 150B, and we have denied a variance request for 1502B. With that said, the Board of Zoning Appeals has 30 days to finalize and the meeting minutes from tonight's meeting. Until then, no action can be taken. You can take action. You can continue constructing. It's at your business, but you're doing so at your own risk. Once our meeting minutes are approved, you have 30 days to appeal that process. Okay? We have several.
You have to appeal it to the common police court.
Correct, as I explained when I opened the meeting here. The next item on our agenda is meeting minutes sign-off and documentation. Jane, there are none to do. Okay. Miscellaneous, we do have another meeting scheduled next month. Our regularly scheduled meeting is May 12, 2015, 7 o'clock. I don't know if we have anything on the agenda at this time, Jane. Nothing. Okay, if we have any further questions, I'm going to motion to adjourn.
Second.
Mrs. Beller,
Yes.
Mr. Freebairn,
Yes.
Mr. Stewart,
Yes.
Mr. Parker,
Yes.
Mr. Peeler.
Yes.
We are adjourned.